Kenneth Copeland, once among the wealthiest and most influential televangelists in the U.S., has been sentenced to life in prison following a trial that revealed decades of financial misconduct. At 87 years old, the founder of Kenneth Copeland Ministries stood silent as Judge Martin Reynolds delivered a sentence that effectively ends his long-standing religious empire. The charges, which included fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion, stemmed from a sweeping investigation that began after a former insider came forward with thousands of pages of evidence. The case against Copeland started when Michael Thornton, a former deputy financial controller for the ministry, turned whistleblower. Thornton testified that he could no longer tolerate watching people donate their last dollars, while Copeland used those offerings to fund his extravagant lifestyle. He provided detailed records showing how donations meant for ministry work were diverted to purchase jets, real estate, and luxury items. Thornton's testimony marked the beginning of a joint investigation by the IRS, FBI, and Department of Justice. Authorities uncovered that Copeland had diverted more than $150 million in donations to fund a lavish life that included multiple private jets, sprawling mansions, and expensive vehicles. Records showed $17.5 million spent on aircraft in just 1 year, all while claiming to supporters that the money was helping missionary work. The investigation revealed an intricate web of over 30 shell companies and offshore accounts used to hide funds from tax authorities. Staff members were ordered to falsify donation records and expenses to maintain the ministry's tax-exempt status. Prosecutors made it clear Copeland didn't just misuse church funds. He treated them as his personal bank account. Throughout the trial in Fort Worth, Texas, the courtroom was packed with former followers, many of whom had given life savings to the ministry, believing Copeland's promises of divine reward. Some cried openly as prosecutors played footage of Copeland flying in ministry-funded jets while asking for seed faith donations from financially desperate viewers. One video from 2018 showed him urging people to give their best offering, claiming God would erase their debts. That appeal alone brought in $20 million, $6 million of which was traced to a Florida property bought under a shell company controlled by Copeland's relatives. U.S. Attorney Caroline Marchand told the jury that Copeland preyed on the trust of sincere believers. He convinced thousands that their giving was a sacred act, only to use that money for personal enrichment. Copeland's legal team tried to frame the case as religious persecution. They claimed his wealth was essential for international ministry work and aligned with his prosperity gospel teachings, which hold that faithfulness leads to material blessings. His attorney insisted that donors were aware of how their money was being used and supported his lifestyle as a sign of divine favor. But this defense collapsed when prosecutors played recorded conversations in which Copeland referred to donors as sheep and joked about deceiving them. In one recording, he laughed about a widow who donated her life insurance payout, saying, "She thinks she's getting a heavenly return, but the only return is my new hanger." Emails were also presented in court showing Copeland instructing staff to invent fake mission projects and produce staged photos for fundraising purposes. Testimony from former employees described a culture of fear and manipulation within the ministry. Sarah Williams, Copeland's former assistant, said staff were required to sign strict non-disclosure agreements and were threatened with both lawsuits and spiritual punishment if they questioned financial matters. She recounted how those who raised concerns were fired and publicly shamed during church services, often accused of being influenced by evil forces. Other damaging evidence included bank records that showed donations meant for disaster relief, such as aid for Hurricane Katrina victims, were instead funneled into real estate deals benefiting the Copeland family. Only a fraction of the money actually reached relief organizations. David Martinez, the ministry's former director of international missions, testified that he was ordered to write fake reports about schools and hospitals that never existed. When he protested, Copeland told him the details didn't matter. What mattered was that donors felt good about giving. During the trial, Eagle Mountain International Church, the legal name for Copeland's ministry, tried to separate itself from his actions by claiming ignorance. That attempt backfired when prosecutors revealed that board members had repeatedly approved transactions that transferred church funds to Copeland's control. Those same members received personal perks like vacations labeled as ministry retreats, luxury cars, and housing stipends despite having no pastoral roles. As the guilty verdict was read, Copeland remained expressionless. His wife and family members, who had stayed mostly out of the spotlight during the proceedings, were absent. During the sentencing, tensions reportedly grew within the family as they each sought to protect themselves amid the fallout. During the sentencing, several former followers gave emotional statements describing how Copeland's promises had led to financial ruin and spiritual heartbreak. Mary Thompson, a 76-year-old widow, shared how she gave her entire $340,000 retirement savings after her husband's death, believing Copeland's assurances that God would restore it many times over. Now homeless, she lives with her daughter. Robert Castillo from Houston described how his family gave over $800,000 to the ministry, even refinancing their home, only to lose everything. Janet Williams, whose husband refused medical care for cancer based on Copeland's teachings, described how he died thinking his faith was not strong enough to heal him. Given the chance to speak before sentencing, Copeland showed no remorse. He quoted scripture, insisted his conscience was clear, and claimed he was being persecuted like the Apostle Paul for preaching prosperity. Judge Reynolds, unmoved, said Copeland had exploited faith for personal gain with a shocking lack of accountability. The judge emphasized that while the Constitution protects religious freedom, it does not shield financial crimes committed under the pretense of religious work. Along with the life sentence, the court ordered the seizure of around $240 million. In assets including a massive lakefront estate, private jets, and real estate across several states, Eagle Mountain International Church was placed under court-appointed receivership to manage its assets and determine which could be liquidated. To repay victims, while religious functions would be preserved, commercial operations built through fraud would be dismantled. As Copeland was escorted out in handcuffs, reactions outside the courthouse varied. Some former supporters expressed relief and vindication, while others still viewed him as a persecuted prophet. Protesters held signs claiming spiritual warfare and government overreach, while former followers found closure through shared stories of betrayal and emotional abuse. The implications of the case extend beyond Copeland. Legal scholars believe it could signal a shift toward greater oversight of large religious organizations, many of which have operated without financial transparency due to First Amendment protections. The IRS has already announced plans to investigate similar ministries, and lawmakers are pushing for reforms to nonprofit laws that could prevent future abuses. Industry watchdogs like the Trinity Foundation hailed the verdict as long overdue. Meanwhile, several televangelists distanced themselves from Copeland, quietly removing mentions of him from their platforms. His ministry issued a short statement promising reform under new leadership, but with its founder in prison and funds frozen, its future remains uncertain. Attendance at the church has reportedly plummeted, and affiliated leaders are forming their own organizations. Many evangelical Christians are using this moment for introspection. The scandal has sparked calls from theologians to reject the prosperity gospel in favor of teachings focused on humility and service. Russell Moore wrote that this case should push churches to reevaluate how financial promises have distorted the message of Christ. At 87, Copeland is expected to spend his remaining years in a federal medical prison near Fort Worth, not far from the empire he built and lost. Sociologists say his followers may face long-term psychological effects as they come to terms with the betrayal. Support groups are forming across the country to help people recover from what they now see as years of manipulation masked as ministry.